everyone, this is Pico Entertainment and we are back again, and we're going to talk now about Black Lightning and the season 3 finale episode titled Liberation. And this was the culmination of the season long arcs dealing with the whole ASA Markovian occupation storyline. And yeah, I thought this was a very epic, action packed finale. We had, lots of special effects, lots of great fight sequences, lots of very intense dramatic moments and emotional moments and developments, and it was really what you would expect from finale for season finale, what I would want from a season finale, right? Where you culminate all the kind of themes that have gone on throughout the entire season, and then you get a massive kind of event filled installment which resolves all of your season arcs and then leaves some sort of setups to keep you invested for the next season, right? So I think for the most part, this episode achieved all of that. There was so much going on, so much jam packed into it. I think though, it was probably a bit too much. It was a bit too much that was crammed into one single episode. There were many developments that could have been taken out to allow time for other developments, and I think this would have made it just a much more of a smoother, more kind of almost classic finale that I think this episode wanted to strive for. It wanted to be, but it just wasn't, because there was just so much going on, and I think more events or more sequences needed time to breathe, and they could maybe stand out and have a bit more impact they were going for, other than other developments which you really didn't need, and it kind of just disrupted the episode to a certain extent. And they kind of went to kind of wrap everything up, and you could kind of feel the strain of it later on in the episode. And I think this was such a encompassing story arc, between the ASA and the Markovians, that you needed really another episode. I know normally the seasons, I believe, are like 16 episodes, and this one was only 15, I believe. Yeah, 15. So yeah, it just needed just another episode just to fully lengthen out the structure of what it was trying to tell. But overall, still very, I think, satisfactory episode, and still, yes, it got me excited enough to see what would happen for season 4. So that's my quick non-spoiler of this episode. So if you don't want to be spoiled by this episode anymore, stop watching now, go back and watch the episode, and then come back to this video, because I'm going to go into depth now, the overall kind of order of events of this episode, and we've got a lot to get through, so I'm going to try and be as concise as I can. So the episode begins, we picked up from the kind of cliffhanger of the previous episode, where we have that great sequence of Gravedigger and Jeff running together, given that intent we're going to get a really big epic fight sequence. We pick up from there and we carry on with them fighting each other, and it done this typical thing that annoys me a bit about Black Lightning, and Luke Cage does this as well. When we get a big kind of action scene or fight sequence, what we should get is this really tense, dramatic, kind of cinematic music, but instead we get this soundtrack driven hip hop and jazz orientated kind of music theme, and for me it takes away a lot of the tension and the suspense that you should merit with the sequence. And this has happened a couple of times throughout this episode alone, and it happens a lot throughout the season, and I know it's a very much of a blaxploitation themed show, and they want to have all this hip hop and jazz and soul music into it. Nothing wrong with that to an extent, but I think sometimes it robs these sequences of the true exciting kind of tension that you need it to go through. But we had that fight sequence, and then we had this scene as well when we had the reporter, if you remember, she had a casual relationship with Anissa, and she was introduced early on, and I think she was kind of investigating the resistance, what was going on with there. And again, we hadn't seen her for ages. She kind of just pops out of nowhere, and she assumed that she gets shot by the kind of impact going on between Jeff and Black Lightning, and she ends up dead. And it was just a bit weird, because you're like, well, you just popped out of nowhere, and okay, we're just going to kill you off now. And it was kind of, why are we showing her, giving a reporting perspective of this fight? I want to see the fight. Show me the fight, right? I'm not bothered about this character. Like I said, we haven't seen her for ages. We weren't really asking about what happened to her. But okay, she dies. Okay, fair enough. So we further on, and Jeff reveals to Gravedigger that they're related to each other. If you remember from previous episodes, Gravedigger is established as the original Meta, and he has that descendant line that's followed through to Jeff. That's why him and Anissa and Jen are able to have a much more stable control over their powers as opposed to the other metas on there. So Gravedigger at this point is more about his own mission. So he kind of absorbs Jeff's powers, and he seems like he's defeating Jeff, and then Jeff kind of frees away from it, and then they take Jen away. Gravedigger walks away on there. So that's the kind of starting point of that battle going on there. We then cut away to the ASA base, and Ordell has kind of realised now that Freeland and the Metas is kind of, it's out of their control now. It's kind of this operation that they're trying to undertake is kind of falling apart. So as you do with these big kind of government agencies, they want to sever all ties that's linking them to any sort of connection to the Metas, Markovia, Black Lightning, etc., etc. So he's there with Commander Williams and the other female commander, and he's basically telling them this is the plan. We need to come out of Freeland now, and they know the Markovians are coming, so they want to sever all ties on this. So Commander Williams kind of gives him his second look, and also says, "Did I stutter?" And I think Commander Williams deep down wants them to stay in Freeland and kind of continue with the occupation, but no, they're not going to do that on there. So they moving on there. We go on to the next scene where we see Jen. She's captured with Gravedigger, and this is a great scene, I think, where we have a back and forth between Gravedigger and Jen, where they kind of talk about their different ideals and approaches. And Gravedigger, he wants to collate all the metas together, and Jen says that's wrong because you're using them against your own will, just for your own purposes. We have this great debate about the likes of Obama, and Gravedigger thinks he's kind of a sheep and he's controlled by other people, and that Martin Luther King was a coward. And Jen comes back and says, no, Martin Luther King was a hero. Gravedigger comes back with her again, says, well, how do you know? You've only been on this planet for a short amount of time. I've lived here for 100 years. I've known way more knowledge than what you have. So yeah, I really like that scene as well. It was well acted by both actors involved in that scene. Yeah, and it's just good when you get that kind of thematic approach between two characters, what they're standing for, what they believe in. I think that adds depth to the roles and the characters within the storyline. So that was very good on there. So we move on. We have Lady Eve. She meets up with the ASA. If you remember from the previous episode, she made an arrangement with Ordell that if she told him where the briefcase was, which has all the ASA information, that he will reaffirm her position as top of the criminal hierarchy in Freeland, right? That's where we saw Lady Eve to begin with. That's where she wants to kind of reclaim her position. So this meeting with the ASA is part of that arrangement. She tells them that Gamby has now the briefcase, and they say, fine, okay, we'll set you back up, but we're going to set you back in Gotham, right? So she's first of all thinking, well, why are you doing that? And then Lady Eve clicks onto the fact that the ASA, they want to nuke Freeland again, as I mentioned, severing all ties, right? So that alerts her to that, and then we have a big shootout between the ASA and Lady Eve's groups. This result in, I believe, Lady Eve, it seemed like she got fatally wounded, because we see her, she's kind of struggling against the wall and her lip is bleeding, and what she does then, she contacts Lala, right, who we know they've had a previous arrangement in the past, and she informs him, or she tells someone from the organisation to tell Lala that the ASA, they're planning to nuke the Freeland. You've got to tell Lala he's going to do something about it. Lala is very precious about Freeland. It's it's his base. It's where he's brought up in. So she realizes that Lala is going to be put into action and do something about this. So we don't know if Lady Eve survives. Again, it's kind of this thing Black Lightning does where it kills characters off and then brings them back again. So it wouldn't surprise me if we saw Lady Eve resurface in season 4. So we push on from that development on there. So we have Tobias, and he's looking now. He's kind of escaped the a large this part of the season. He's been kind of under hostage, tested on to kind of generate this new serum. He's escaped now, and he encounters the doctors, and he wants to kind of look for new metas as such. This is one of really 2 times we don't see Tobias because we're focused on another theme, so I'll revert to that later on in the episode. At this point, everything's moving nicely. We go on to the next development where we see Dr. Jace, and we knew that she was captured previously by Brandon, right? So when Commander Williams shows up at their house, it's revealed that obviously they had some sort of tracking device on Dr. Jace, because before she was quite critical to the ASA and helping out with their experiments. So it makes sense that they would keep some sort of way to trace her whereabouts, right? So Commander Williams, he comes to her house, he sees her being captured. Dr. Jace thinks that she's going to be rescued because she feels she's still essential to the ASA. Not so the case. Commander Williams takes her out because again they want to cut off all ties. And I was a bit disappointed because I actually liked Dr. Jace. I liked she had this very cynical, sarcastic tone to her, and she was always winding Lynn up. I actually liked the dynamic between the two. Anytime he had something serious going on, she would always make these jokes, and it was kind of like she enjoyed the kind of chaos and lunacy that was happening around her. She very much reveled in all the jeopardy and the peril as such, and she was just going along for the ride. And I actually think this was a character you could have continued into season 4. One of those characters I think there's a lot more mileage to go on there. Her relationship with Lynn, and obviously their kind of connection with Brandon, right? So I think this is a character you could have kept around. So yeah, it was just a bit sudden and a bit quick that you just kill her off like that. So okay, so again we're just moving on at quite a quick pace. So we don't. This is one of those moments for me where we don't really have a chance to really take it in. That her death, she just gets taken out. So okay, we move on to the next part, which is the ASA and the fact that where they've decided to nuke Freeland, that's alerted Lala, and then we see Henderson. He comes out. As we know, he's been leading this resistance against the occupation. He comes out. He's collecting his forces together, and then I assume it's the Markovians that come out in the street battle, and then it looks like they're going to get overrun. But then we see Lala's team come out and they take out the Markovians. And this is one sequence I believe could have been extended for a little bit longer. Right, this is an epic moment. We know the Markovians are a big force to be reckoned with, and yeah, this just came across as too easily won. I think Lala's forces, they won the battle too easy. I would have wanted to lengthen out this sequence and made a much more of an epic standout moment in this episode. I'll refer to a moment where other parts could have been taken up, but it reminded me a bit of the shootout sequence in the first season of Daredevil. I think it's the season finale, I believe. You get that great shootout sequence when they kind of rescue Wilson Fisk from the prison van. That's the kind of sequence I wanted from this, and it just felt a bit too quick, too easily resolved. The Markovians just overcome like that. And again, we have this kind of music, the soundtrack music, not the cinematic sort of film driven music that I want, that I think would elevate these sequences even more. So again, I just felt a bit shortchanged throughout this sequence, but fair enough, they get taken out, and then Henderson gives his nod of approval to Lala, nod of approval, and then they all walk off out there because again they're both tied very much to Freeland, right? So we move on to the next part, and we see that Commander Williams continuing this initiative of cutting off all bonds to the ASA. He now goes back to the lab and he sees Lynn on there, and she's working on a serum, if you like, to disarm Gravedigger, and he goes to take her out, and they have this conversation. Lynn tries to reach out to him to the fact that she refers to the fact that he's a meta, and you want to stand up for what you believe in because you can relate to the other metas and you're part of Freeland. Commander Williams doesn't see himself as a meta, and I think this is because he sees the metas as pawns, right? Kind of people who are just fiddled around and passed about to do whatever bidding, right? Commander Williams, I think, has a much more sense of value and identity to himself. He's not just a mindless metas who's controlled. So he took objection to that. He tries to take Lynn out. We see that Lynn is taking the kind of serum that she's been working on. The bullets just kind of bounce off her, and then she just swats him away. I don't think he's dead. I mean, he was lying around motionless, but there was no indication that he died. As I said previously, Black Clotin does have this habit of bringing characters back from the dead, but Commander Williams is another one who we could see later on resurface in season 4. So I wouldn't bank on him not coming back on there. And just quickly, we see later on a scene between Jeff as he reckons or meets up with Lynn, and I think he wants Lynn to give him the serum, but she says no, I'll keep hold of it. So this is the ongoing theme, and we see that Lynn is really now getting a huge taste of having these abilities, these powers. We've seen her previously have this green light addiction, which will be referred to later. So yeah, that's an interesting development. I think it's going to play out later on in the season, and we're going to see Lynn become a lot more obsessed with having these abilities and these powers, and maybe give herself more serums or more injections, or to try and make herself more powerful, because I suppose she might be vexed the fact that Jeff, Anissa and Jen, they all have the superpowers, but she doesn't. So that's a very interesting thing to look out for going forward for possibly season 4. So we move on to the next part now, and this is the part that I had issue with, is that Khalil. Now, Khalil is a character, we know he's had this relationship with Jen, and he used to work with Tobias, and he's been killed and brought back, and I kind of felt Khalil's role was done this season, right? He had this identity of painkiller. He was doing work for the ASA, and then they kind of resuscitated him. They were able to tap into this consciousness, and he's had this mental battle when he's tried to kind of suppress and overcome the painkiller identity, right? So he kind of overcame this previously, and we saw that scene in previously where he kind of left Jen. So when they have that scene at her house, so you kind of think, okay, that's done now. They've separated. Khalil's realised he's just too dangerous to be around Jen, because he's not sure when the painkiller identity is going to resurface. So that's why he left, right? So you think, fair enough, his arc is done. But he keeps coming back, and we had this sword fight sequence, yeah, which again is Khalil wrestling with the painkiller identity. And for me, this was unnecessary. Like, I watched this sequence, and it's this back and forth, and we get this, choreography, and we get the kind of slow motion parts, and I'm thinking, why are we doing this? Why are we here? There's more important things going on here to kind of go back to a repetitive motion where we've seen Khalil battle with his mental demons and painkiller, right? Why are we doing this? And this was quite a lengthy sequence, and this is one sequence where I think we could have taken out, and we could have dedicated more time, to the street battle or the fight with Jeff and Gravedigger at the beginning. It just felt so prolonged, and it just wasn't needed. And Khalil wins out anyway, right? So we kind of, well, you just repeated the same stage that we got to, right? So this fight wasn't needed. Not a bad sequence. And again, Khalil isn't a bad character. I just feel he's a bit unnecessary. And we've got far more significant parts of the story, significant parts of the character that we could be focused on, rather than Khalil getting to grips with painkiller yet again. So this was just an unnecessary sequence, and I think hurt the finale again. This was one of the elements that gave it that kind of crammed, jam-packed feeling, and we didn't need it. We just didn't need it. They should have just had Khalil just carry on his mission and just not have this sequence at all. So we go on to the next part, and we see Gravedigger encountering Anissa and Grace, and also beforehand the Resistance, and Gravedigger's powers just come a bit inconsistent. Sometimes he's super powered and he's Mr. Invincible, and we see him threaten from the sky and he's deflecting bullets, etc., etc. But in other times he's easily defeated, and there was this kind of back and forth, and it was really, again, inconsistent of how strong of an adversary he is, right? But we get to the point where he takes on the Resistance, and he kind of sends them to sleep on there, and we get this beginning part where he puts them in a coma, and Jen and Jeff arrive at the bodies. They're looking at the bodies, and then the soldiers are saying, oh, Black Lightning's here, shall we take him out? Gravedigger gives the order, and then we see Henderson come in, right? He's part of the Resistance on here. Gamby tells him not to encounter him, but when he sees Jeff's in danger, he intervenes. He then takes a fatal shot to the chest, and we see him lying on the floor when Jen and Jeff come to rescue him. We see he's just mortally wounded to the point if he's moved, he's going to get killed. So yeah, this was again another moment that I think just needed a bit more. It was well acted, the fact that Henderson now has died, but it just felt a bit, again, short-lived, short-changed. And this is one moment that needed to be a big moment, because Henderson has been with Jeff from the beginning of this series, right? They've been friends long time throughout. We go back to when Jefferson was the principal at Freeland's school, and there was always this back and forth between him and Henderson throughout how they're going to combat crime and combat racism. What's the best way to do it? And then Henderson was always angry at Jeff for not telling him about his Black Lightning identity. Henderson kind of figured it out for himself. So Henderson was really a long established character, and I think when you're going to have him dying like this, it just needed for me a bit more weight. It wasn't lacking the significant. It was lacking the significance rather that I thought this moment gave it. Now I do know that the actor who plays Henderson, he was leaving this season. Okay, so yeah, they had to kind of exit him out. They could have kept Henderson around. They could have just have him go away, and they could have recast him in a role. It just felt, again, lacking in weight because we hadn't seen Henderson for about 2 or 3 episodes. He kind of just gone away. This whole resistance thing had just been kind of done away with because we were focusing more on the origin of Gravedigger and the Markovians, right? So Henderson coming back and then just to kill him like that just felt a bit throwaway. It was a well acted part with Jefferson, and we see the emotions of him with Henderson, but it just needed a bit more. Again, more time that could have been used if we hadn't spent as much time with Khalil and his sword fight with him in Painkiller. Okay, so we go on from there, and then we go back to Grace and Anissa, and when they encountered Gravedigger again, he goes back into using more of his abilities of his mind control. I commented before, didn't I, how inconsistent his power set was. He could have used his mind control on Lynn or Jen or Jeff. Why didn't he do that? But he uses it on Grace to fight. On Anissa on Grace to fight Anissa, right? And a good fight sequence on here. And I was one of the people that I thought Grace was going to die. We know in the previous episode that Anissa and Grace got married just out of the blue, and I felt, okay, they're just setting up for Grace to die, and then it's going to have this big emotional reaction from Anissa, right? But that didn't happen. Anissa kind of throws her up in the ceiling and puts her in like a coma-like state. So they're going to keep her around, I guess, for season 4. It will be interesting to see what happens with Anissa, because we know she's kind of like the more rogue character. She'll always just go off on her own, and she's very headstrong, very stubborn at times, and she's very rebellious. I actually think that Jen is actually a much more of an emotionally mature character than what Anissa is, right? Because as we know, Jen is the more powerful, and she's been having to get to grips with her powers, and I think she's done it in a much more better way than what Anissa has with her. So it'd be very interesting to see if Anissa goes off the rails again and goes off her own again throughout season 4. So that's an interesting development. Will Grace wake up, or will they just kill her off later on in the season, and will it just make Anissa go in this downward spiral? So it's very interesting development to look out for. So we go back again, and we go with Jeff and Gravedigger again. Prior to that, we have a great sequence of Gravedigger fighting with Jen and Brandon, and the effects were great. They were using all their laser beams and electronic forces on there. Great effects on here. They seem to be getting the upper hand on Gravedigger, and then he comes back, he uses this kind of heat vision or laser vision, and it sends them flinging back. It's a great sequence. It's a highlight of this episode that they really went all out to pack in as much action and excitement as possible, and I really like this sequence. Effects are really well done. We go forward, he meets Jeff again, they have a second fight, and again this is one of those where Gravedigger is getting the upper hand, and then Lynn comes up behind him, she shoots him with the pellets of the serum. This disarms Gravedigger. He can't use his mind control powers anymore. Jeff kind of recovers, shoots him with his electronic beam, and then Gravedigger we kind of seen is defeated on. And again, it just comes across as too easy. It's too easy. It's too quick. It's almost as as if you say, if you just left Jeff and Gravedigger, you think Jeff would overpower him eventually anyway. So again, they've done such a good job over these last 2-3 episodes of establishing Gravedigger as this truly threatening villain, but then he just keeps getting beaten all the time again, just too easily, just overcome too easily. It reminded me a lot of the ending of season 2, right? If you remember, Tobias is defeated by Jen and Black Lightning. And again, we've done a great job of building up Tobias as this really strong villain, and they just come into his house and just boom, just beat him within 1 or 2 maneuvers. It's just too quick, it's too easy. So yeah, and again, you just need more. You just need more. If you're gonna set up this great villain, they need to be more powerful. There needs to be much more of a struggle to overcome them and defeat them. But fair enough, they beat him, and we go back later to Ordell. He's set up now a self-destruct sequence within the ASA, and again, they want to cut all ties, so the building's going to blow up. Lynn wants to leave Gravedigger because he's a threat. He could come back to kill us, but Jeff's like, no, he's related to me. I've got to save him. So they have a debate, and then I think actually Lynn wins out, and they kind of leave Gravedigger there, and they fly out the building. The building explodes on this, so that's fair enough, and we come back to Gravedigger later on. So we go back again to another development where we see the ASA again going on this initiative of cutting ties, and they arrive at Gambi's shop, right? To take him out, right? And again, I would have thought Gambi, he's always one of these characters. He's 2, 3, 4 steps ahead of everyone. He does all the planning and sets up with the security. So you would have thought he would have been alerted more to the ASA coming to his shop, right? But he doesn't. They come to his shop, they shoot it all down, and it's just him and TC, I believe. And then TC gets shot, and this was another scene I wasn't convinced with, because Gambi says, right, he's happy you're all here because you're the kind of last people who know about the identities of the Pierce family, right? So if I take you out, that's it, their identities are going to be protected. And I know Gambi is extra resourceful. Like I said, previous videos, Gambi's one of my favourite characters, but for him to just take out the ASA force on his own is a bit of a stretch. And again, this was another sequence that was just too short-lived. I would have liked this perhaps to be stretched out, overhauled, to maybe set up as a cliffhanger, right? Where we see the ASA swarm in, you get all this dramatic music. Gambi tries to alert whatever defences he can, but he's getting overrun. They're shooting at him from all angles, and then we kind of just leave it. We leave that cliffhanger dangling for next season to see if Gambi and TC survive or not. I would have preferred that approach rather than Gambi just taking them out just very easily, and wasn't that too much of a bother for him. So again, just another sequence that could have benefited from having more time added to it. Other sequences get taken out, and it just felt a bit anticlimactic and a bit too easily resolved. And again, this is when the episode now is in that full-on mode of wrapping everything up and tying everything up together now. And the problem you have with that is sequences that should be epic are happening too quickly and not having the bombastic effect they should have done. So this was another sequence I think could have been extended for longer on there. Right, so we come to the last development now, and we see Khalil. Ordell now wants to leave the ASA, relocate. Khalil catches up with him in the SUV. He reminds him that when you put me under the painkiller identity, you killed my mother, as we saw in the previous series. So now this is Khalil wanting to get his revenge. Ordell tries to state this speech pattern to try and control Painkiller, but Khalil reminds Ordell that he's now overtaken the Painkiller identity, so you can't control him anymore. So he shoots Ordell in the back or the spleen. Jeff tries to come in and stop Khalil, but Khalil's already done it. Khalil says, right, I haven't killed him, you can deal with him as you want to, because Jeff said it'd be far better to have Ordell get his comeuppance in court and go to jail and suffer out the rest of his years being incarcerated in prison, right? So again, I assume we probably won't see Ordell again. I've really enjoyed Ordell. I think he's been a great villain. He came through late on in season 2, didn't he? And then has been a mainstay throughout season 3. I think Bill Duke has really been great. There's kind of been this back and forth. A lot of the time, Ordell was controlling the Pierces, and then they've kind of got the upper hand on him, and he's been back and forth. This very kind of shadowy figure in the background, kind of like that Amanda Waller. If you know your DC comics or mythology, Amanda Waller is in charge of Cadmus. She's this very shadowy figure in the background, and that's what I saw Ordell as in this show. So he's, really good character in this. Will we see him in season 4? Maybe. We might get a one-off performance when he's in prison. Maybe they break him out, or they might need to rely on his knowledge for whatever new force they encounter in season 4. So it wouldn't shock me if we don't see Bill Duke again as Ordell in the future. But yeah, he was a really good villain overall on there. So we've really now kind of surmised all of the threats, and the ASA now, they've kind of mostly been taken out. The Markovians have mostly been taken out. We have a final scene with Tobias at the end where he's sitting there and he's seen the developments play out, and he's going to begin his quest now to come back to Freeland and want to assume his position at the top of the criminal hierarchy on there. And we note now as well that he's got a thing for Lynn now that she's the Force, so he's going to move in on Lynn. So again, very interesting developments on there. I like Tobias. I think he's a very strong villain. I think it's the strength of the show that they've been able to kind of keep Tobias mostly in the background, but still been able to have a strong storyline. That's the strength of a show, right? Where you can have strong characters come in, come out, and the show doesn't fall apart because you're not reliant on these strong characters alone, right? It's much more of an ensemble piece, right? So yeah, we'll see what other trouble that Tobias is going to cause in season 4. We come to the end of the story now, where we see now that the metas have kind of been rounded up. Everything's kind of been out in the open. We know a lot about the Markovian operation and the ASA operation. We see Lynn in the embassy, right? And we get references to the fact that the metas have been moved to Gotham City. Again, I love all that referencing. Again, just reminding us all that we're all in one big connected universe. As I'm sure you know, but just in case you didn't know, following the crisis, it merged all of the characters onto one Earth. I've always preferred that. And yeah, the reference to Gotham is a signature note to that. But we also get the revelation, of course, that Lynn is still using the green lights, right? And again, this is a great development for Lynn, as I mentioned before, going forward for season 4. And we're going to see the fallout again. Has she managed to suppress it, where she can use it as and when she can, or we're just going to spiral into a deeper addiction? Is she going to try to fuse it with other powers and serums that she's been building up over this season? Are we going to get interesting development where her and Jeff, they've always had this, very kind of fractious relationship between them. They're always breaking up, separating, arguing. Are we going to see a case of maybe Lynn joining forces or building up more of a connection with Tobias as she gets addicted more to these powers? Is it going to be a case where Tobias has more access to green light and he supplies that to Lynn, and in return he wants her attention and her help, with building up, his position? That's a very interesting dynamic that we could get in season 4. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. So we get the embassy at the end, and we kind of get Jeff, Anissa, and Lynn. They're kind of giving the kind of testimony in court to the ASA. Jeff brings up the briefcase, which basically has all the plans for the ASA, and revealing the fact what the metas have been doing on there. And yeah, we're just wrapping everything up now. We see them in the courthouse. They come back together, the family lightning, and there's a slow motion walk out of the courtroom, and we see, of course, that one of the members of the court, as he walks out, that he's actually Gravedigger. So again, we're keeping Gravedigger around. I welcome that change because he's been a really good villain, as well as many have, Ordell and Lady Eve and Lala. So that's going to be interesting going forward for season 4, because now, if you think about it, if we resort back to Freeland, like I said, we've got many antagonists. We've still got Lala around. We've still got Tobias around. We've still got Gravedigger around. We can bring Commander Williams back if we want to. We can bring Lady Eve if we want to. We can bring Ordell back if we want to. So you're really going to potentially have an assortment of villains fighting and vying for each position in season 4, which makes it interesting, a lot more involvement, as opposed to having just one big bad kind of they have to fight over the whole season. That's going to be very interesting in itself. So yeah, so that's really a summarization of this finale. Again, very action packed, dramatic, very eventful. For me, a satisfactory finale for what's been, a truly great season of Black Lightning. The best season of not only of this series, but I think overall this year, the best series of the CW show so far. I think the other shows have struggled throughout this season, or this year rather, but Black Lightning has been the best in telling a serialized story arc. It's been very measured, very well paced. It's dealt with a lot of these characters very well. It's full of substance. Again, this whole storyline has really seen an evolution of the show away from the kind of preachy subject matter of the first and second season. You know, when we focus more on race and police brutality and racial segregation, you know, those typical themes that we had throughout. Luke Cage covered this territory as well, and we've seen it much more become a much more of a superhero show, right? Where we've been delved more, we've seen a lot more exhibiting of people's powers and how they cope with those powers, the struggles of their roles, and team. You know, we, as I've mentioned in my episode stand-ups, we've got much more of a team lightning, right? If you think about it, we've got Jeff, we've got Lynn, we've got Anissa, we've got Gamby, we've got TC, we've got Grace, we've got Brandon. You know, we've got the other ASA agent who's now with them now, the kind of ginger white guy. He's with them now, and then we've got the other Chinese girl who exhibited the powers, who Lin was helping before in this season. So we've got quite an expansive team now. So are they going to play that more in season 4? Or are they going to just try and condense it down and keep it to the more family kind of dynamic with Gamby involved as well? So yeah, really good, strong finale. Those are my overall thoughts. I will do a season review of Black Lightning very shortly on there. But again, a very satisfactory finale for what has been the best season of Black Lightning. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you agree with me? Did you enjoy this finale, or did you find it a bit too jam-packed, a bit too chaotic at times? Do you think this has been the best season of Black Lightning, or do you prefer season 1 and season 2 when, like I said, it focused a lot more on the kind of social, you know, racial issues as such? Did you prefer that tone to this much more kind of comic book orientated tone of season 3? So that's my thoughts for now. Take care of yourselves, keep yourself at safe distances, wash your hands, etc., as we know, and I will review more season finales of the other CW shows as and when they arrive. But take care of yourselves for now, and I will see you very soon.